London wore a grey coat that spring. The year was 1816, and the rain came down like an apology no one had asked for. It fell on the wet slate of Mayfair. It fell on the black railings and the swept steps and the sedate doors that told you nothing of the people behind them. Brookhaven House stood at the corner of the square. It was tall and pale and very still. The windows gave back the sky and kept their own counsel. A house like that did not need to raise its voice. It had money in every brick, and everyone in London knew it. The night before, in 2 small rooms above a chandler's shop, a family had decided who would go. It was not much of a family now. It was a father, a daughter, and the ghost of a mother between them. There was a great deal of debt where the furniture used to be. The rooms smelled of tallow from the shop below. They smelled of damp from the walls. A single candle burned, because 2 candles were an extravagance they had learned to do without. George Radthorpe sat by the cold grate with a letter in his hands. He was not an old man. Ruin had aged him past his years. His fingers shook. They had shaken for months, ever since the mine that was to save them proved a hole in the ground with a lie at the bottom. "I should go myself," he said, for the 3rd time. "It is my debt. It is my shame. A man should carry his own shame to the door." "You could not climb the steps, Papa," Evelyn said gently. "You know you could not." She was mending a glove by the candle. She mended everything now. It was cheaper than buying. Her hands were quick, and the work gave her somewhere to put them, while her father wept, which he did often and quietly. It broke her heart a little more each time. "He will not see a woman," her father said. "Dukes do not see women who come about money." "Then he will not see me. I will come home, and we shall be no worse off than we are tonight." Evelyn bit the thread. But he might. A debt is easier to forgive when a person stands in front of you and says the word for it. Money on a page is only figures. A person is a person. I mean to be the person, Papa. Let me be the person. Her father looked at her a long moment in the candlelight. He saw, perhaps, what he had been too frightened to see for 3 years. His plain, quiet daughter had become, somewhere in the falling of the house, the strongest thing left standing in it. "Your mother would have gone," he said at last. "She was never afraid of a great door." "No," Evelyn said. She was not. She looked once at the soft grey pouch on the windowsill. It was her mother's pouch, the one she had carried through every meaner room. She said nothing about it. Some things are not for saying, only for carrying. So it was settled. The daughter would go. She had always been the one who was sent to the neighbours to ask forbearance, sent to the shops to plead 1 more week, sent all her life to carry the family's need to strangers' doors, because a plain girl with a steady voice can go where a proud man cannot. She had made her peace with it. She had made her peace with a great many things. She did not sleep much. She lay in the dark and listened to her father's uneven breathing through the thin wall. She rehearsed, in her head, the words she would say to a duke she had never seen. Into that square, on that grey morning, came a young woman on foot. She had no umbrella. She had chosen not to spend the coin. Her cloak was good wool once, and now the hem was dark with wet, and the cuffs were turned to hide where they had frayed. She walked as though she had rehearsed the walk. Perhaps she had. Her name was Evelyn Radthorpe, and she was 24, and she had been sent. She stopped across from the great door and looked at it. Rain slid off the brim of her bonnet. She did not hurry. She had learned that hurry made a person smaller, and she was small enough already in the eyes of a house like this. So she stood, and she breathed, and she let the fear settle where it could do the least harm. In her hand, she carried a letter. It was folded very small. It named a sum of money her family did not have, and it named the man to whom the money was owed. That man lived behind the pale door. He was the Duke of Brookhaven, and Evelyn had never seen his face. Her father should have come. Her father could not come. He had not left his room in 9 days, and when he did leave it, he wept, and a weeping man cannot bow low enough to please a creditor. So the daughter had put on the good cloak, and taken the letter, and said she would go. "You must be gentle with him," her father had told her, meaning the Duke. "You must not argue. You must ask him to be patient. That is all we have left to ask." "I know, Papa," she had said. She crossed the square. The steps were clean under the rain. She climbed them. She lifted the knocker, which was heavy and cold, and she let it fall once. The sound went into the house and did not come back. A footman opened the door. He was young and powdered and perfectly indifferent. He looked at her wet hem before he looked at her face, and something in his own face closed. "Deliveries at the area door," he said. "I am not a delivery," Evelyn said. Her voice came out steadier than she had feared. That was a small mercy, and she took it. "I have come to see the Duke of Brookhaven," she went on. "My name is Miss Radthorpe. He will not know it, but I believe he is expecting the matter I bring, if not the person." The footman weighed her. She watched him do it. She had been weighed a great deal in her life, and she had grown a skin for it, though the skin was thinner than she liked to pretend. "His Grace does not see callers without cards," the footman said. "Then I shall wait," Evelyn said, "until someone is willing to carry my name inside. I am very patient, and I am already wet. So you see you cannot make it worse by keeping me." For the first time, the young man looked at her face and not her hem. He found something there he had not expected. He was too well trained to show what it was. But he stepped back, and he let her stand in the hall, out of the rain, and he went away to ask. The hall was marble and cold. A great stair climbed into shadow. There were paintings of dead men in good coats, all of them a little disappointed. Evelyn stood on the black and white floor, and dripped and tried not to look at the paintings, because they looked at her. She waited a long time. She had told the truth about her patience. It was not a virtue. It was a habit built out of years, the way a stone in a river grows smooth. When you are the plain daughter, the poor cousin, the one who is sent, you learn to wait. You learn that waiting is a kind of room you can live in. At last, a woman came down the stair. She was old and upright, and dressed in dove grey, without a single ornament. Her hair was white, and her eyes were very clear. She came down slowly, one hand on the rail, and she looked at Evelyn all the way down, not unkindly, but without pretending she was not looking. "You are the Radthorpe girl," the woman said when she reached the floor. "I am Miss Radthorpe, yes." "I am Lady Dorothea. The Duke is my nephew's son. In this house I keep what my grandnephew has no patience to keep, which is nearly everything." The old woman tilted her head. "You came in the rain, with no carriage and no maid, to plead your father's debts. Do you know what most people send in your place?" "A letter, my lady," Or a solicitor? Or nothing at all, and they simply run? Just so. Lady Dorothea's mouth moved, not quite a smile. And why did you not do any of those wiser things? Because a letter cannot be sorry, Evelyn said, and we cannot pay a solicitor. And we did not run, because running is what my father's money did, and I am tired of chasing it. She stopped, and then she said the last of it, because she had come this far. And because someone in my family ought to stand in front of a man and say the word we owe him. If it is to be no one else, then let it be me. The old woman looked at her for a long moment. The rain ticked at the tall windows. Come up, Lady Dorothea said. They went up the great stair together, slowly, for the old woman's knees. At the top a corridor ran the length of the house, hung with more disappointed men. Lady Dorothea led her to a pair of tall doors and did not knock. She opened them and went in, and Evelyn followed, because there was nothing else to do. It was a library. It was the largest room Evelyn had ever stood in. Books went up the walls to a gallery, and up again to the ceiling. A fire burned in a marble grate. Rain ran silver down 3 enormous windows. They gave onto a grey nothing, where a garden should have been. A man stood at the middle window with his back to the door. He was tall. His coat was very plain and very well made, the black of it almost blue in the grey light. His hair was the brown of ash. He did not turn when they came in. He kept his hands clasped behind him, and his eyes on the ruined garden below, as though it owed him an answer too. Marcus, said Lady Dorothea, the Radthorpe daughter has come herself. Try to remember she is a person before she is a debt. Then the old woman sat down in a chair by the fire, folded her hands, and became, to all appearance, part of the furniture. The man at the window turned. He was younger than Evelyn had built him in her fear. 32, perhaps. His face was not cruel. That surprised her more than cruelty would have. It was a still face, guarded to the point of stone, and the eyes in it were a strange warm colour, amber, like a thing lit from behind. Those eyes came to rest on her, and they did not slide to her hem. They stayed on her face. Miss Radthorpe, he said. His voice was low and even. You have chosen a poor day for a walk. I have chosen a poor day for a great many things, Your Grace, Evelyn said. The day was only the last of them. Something moved behind his eyes. Not a smile. The memory of where a smile might go. Sit, he said. I would rather stand. I have come to say a thing that is easier said standing. Then say it. She did. She took the small folded letter from her glove, and she held it, and she did not read from it, because she knew the words by heart, and a person should not read an apology. My father is George Radthorpe, she said. 3 years ago, he borrowed against a promise of tin. The mine was real. The tin was not. The men who sold it to him are gone, and the money is gone, and what is left is the note he signed, which came, by ways I do not fully understand, into your hands. It names £4,000. We do not have 4,000 shillings. My father is not well. He sent no one, because there was no one to send. So I have come, in his place, to tell you that we know the debt is just, and that we are sorry, and to ask you for time. Not forgiveness. Time. That is the whole of what I came to say. The room was quiet. The fire spoke. The rain spoke. The Duke of Brookhaven looked at her, and for a while he said nothing at all. You said the debt is just, he said finally. Most people in your place tell me it is a mistake. It is not a mistake. My father was a fool. A fool is not the same as a thief, but the man he owes does not have to care about the difference. I know that. I am not asking you to care about it. I am asking for time, and I am telling you the truth, because I find I have nothing left to spend but the truth, and I would rather spend it than a lie. He came a step nearer. The firelight moved on him. Do you know what a note like your father's is worth to a man like me? He asked. Very little, I should think. You could forget it and never feel the lack. Yes, he said. I could. He studied her. And do you know what it is worth to your father? Everything, Evelyn said. It is the last wall of the house. When it falls, we have no roof. He turned that over. He was, she saw, a man who turned things over rather than let them fall from his hands by accident. It was not warmth, but it was not carelessness either, and she had feared carelessness most. You came without a maid, he said. You walked. You are wet through. Why? Because a hired carriage is money, and I have none to waste on the way to beg for mercy. It would be a strange kind of begging that arrived in style. At the fire, Lady Dorothea made a small sound. It might have been a cough. It sounded remarkably like a laugh she had decided not to have. The Duke did not look away from Evelyn. You may tell your father, he said slowly, that I will give the matter my thought. Come back on Thursday. Come in the morning. Come, if it please you, in the rain, since you seem to have made peace with it. I will have an answer. It was not yes. It was not no. It was, she understood, the most that a man like this gave to a woman like her on a first meeting, and she had been raised to be grateful for a great deal less. So she inclined her head, and she thanked him with a plainness that cost her, and she went to the door. She had almost reached it when he spoke again. Miss Radthorpe. She stopped. She did not turn all the way. The garden, he said. You looked at it when you came in. Everyone who comes into this room looks at the fire, or the books, or at me. You looked at the garden. It is dead, Evelyn said. That is why I looked. Most people do not trouble to look at dead things. Then most people are wrong, she said. A dead garden is only a living one that no one forgave. I did not mean to be rude, Your Grace. It is a habit. I look at gardens. It is the one thing I am good at, and a person likes to look at what they are good at, even in another man's house. Good morning. And she went out and left him standing in the grey light, with the rain running down the glass, looking now at the dead garden himself. Behind him, Lady Dorothea rose from her chair. Well, she said. Do not, said the Duke. I have said nothing. You are about to. You have the look. The old woman crossed to the window. She stood beside her grandnephew and gazed down at the wreck of the garden, the black beds, the broken frames of the glass house, where nothing had grown in 6 years since his mother died. 22 days, Lady Dorothea said. That is what my sister Millicent's will allows you. 22 days to take a wife, or oakhold, and every unentailed penny go to your cousin, who will sell the pictures within the month, and the land within the year. 22 days, Marcus. And you have spent the season refusing every suitable girl in London, as though you were choosing a horse you meant to shoot. I am aware of the will, the Duke said. I wrote out the days myself. Lady Estella still expects you. Her mother has all but ordered the flowers. Lady Estella, said the Duke, expects a duchess's coronet on a face she can bear to see in the glass. She does not expect me. There is a difference. though I grant you it is a fine one, and I am likely the only man in England who insists upon it. You have refused 30 women this season, Lady Dorothea said. I kept the count, since you would not. Some were amiable, some were rich, 1 or 2 were both, and wept in their carriages when your letters came. You have made yourself the most hunted man in London, and the coldest, and I do not think you have enjoyed a single hour of it. Enjoyment was never the point, the Duke answered. The point was that I could not look at any one of them across a breakfast table and imagine a life. And why not? They are handsome enough. They are well bred. Any of them would be grateful to the end of her days. That is precisely why not. His voice did not rise. It never rose, and that was the frightening thing about it. They would be grateful for the coronet, and would tolerate the man who came attached to it. I have watched them all do the same small sum behind their eyes. They weigh my faults against my rank, and they find the rank, on balance, worth the trouble. A lifetime of being tolerated as the price of a house. I would sooner lose the house. The old woman was quiet a moment. The rain ticked at the tall glass. You were not always so hard, she said more gently. I remember a warm boy. What became of him? He was cheaper to love, the Duke said. He did not come with a duchy attached. Somewhere between the boy and the man, they stopped seeing me at all. They see the title, the money, the name of the house. They call the whole of it Marcus. Then they marry it. I am tired, Aunt. I am tired in a way I did not know a man could be. Not one of them has ever once looked at me and seen only a man. They look, and they see rooms they would like to live in. Lady Dorothea watched the dead garden. That girl who just left, she said, did not once look at your coronet. The Duke said nothing. She looked at your garden, the old woman went on, and called it a living thing that no one forgave. In 22 days you must marry someone, Marcus. I only observe that most of the someones on offer would look at the garden and see mud. We'll take a very short break. If you don't want to miss new stories, please subscribe to the channel. Evelyn did not tell her father everything. She told him the Duke had been civil. She told him there would be an answer on Thursday. She did not tell him about the garden, or the amber eyes, or the strange, still way the great man had looked at her face and not her hem. Those things she kept. They were hers, and she had so few things that were only hers that she had grown careful of them. Their lodgings were 2 rooms above a chandler's shop in a narrow street off the river. The place kept its 2 familiar smells, tallow rising through the boards and river damp working down through the plaster, though Evelyn had long since stopped noticing either. Her father sat by the small window with a blanket over his knees, though the day was not cold, and he turned his signet ring around and around on a finger gone thin. Thursday, he said. And you think he means to be kind? I think he means to think, Evelyn said, which is more than most men do before they are cruel. We must be content with it, Papa. She made him tea. She had bought a very little, and she made it weak, and he did not notice, because he had never in his life noticed the price of anything until the prices were the only things left. She loved him. That was the plain truth under everything. She loved a foolish, gentle, broken man who had gambled her mother's memory into the hands of strangers. And she loved him anyway, because love is not a ledger, though ruin makes you wish it were. On the small sill sat a pouch of soft grey leather. It was her mother's. It held seeds. Her mother had gathered them, year after year, from the garden of the house they had lost first, the good house in the country, with the walled garden and the old pear trees, larkspur and stock and sweet rocket, foxglove and columbine, wallflower for the wall. Her mother had labelled each twist of paper in a small brown hand. She had died with the labels unfinished. Evelyn had carried the pouch through every meaner room they had fallen into since. She had planted not one seed. You do not plant a garden in rooms you will lose by winter. She took the pouch up now and held it. The seeds whispered inside, dry and patient, waiting for ground that would keep them. One day, she told them, as she always did, one day. Thursday came grey again. She walked. The footman knew her this time, and let her in without the speech about the area door. Lady Dorothea met her in the hall and took her up herself, and there was something in the old woman's manner, a brightness held down hard, that made Evelyn's heart begin to beat in a way she did not trust. The Duke was at the window again. He turned at once this time. "Miss Radthorpe," he said, "sit. No, do not tell me you would rather stand. Sit. What I have to say is not easier standing, for either of us." She sat. She folded her wet gloves in her lap and waited. He did not sit. He stood by the cold garden window, with his hands behind him. He looked at her. She saw that whatever he meant to say cost him something. She could not think what a thing might be that could cost a duke. "I have considered your father's debt," he said. "I will tell you my decision plainly, because you have paid me the compliment of plainness, and I will not insult you with less. I will forgive the note, the whole of it, £4,000. It will be as though it never was." Evelyn's breath left her. "Your Grace, I have not finished. I will forgive the note, and I will settle a further sum upon your father, enough that he may live out his days without fear, in comfort, in the country, where the air is better than tallow." He paused. "I will do these things on one condition. I ask you to hear the whole of it before you speak, because it will offend you, and I would rather you were offended by the truth than by a piece of it." "Say it," Evelyn said. Her hands had gone very still in her lap. "I must marry," the Duke said, "within 20 days. My great-aunt Millicent, who did not love me, left the whole of the unentailed estate against a clause. I must have a wife before my 33rd birthday, which falls this month. If I do not, Oakhold passes to a cousin. His farms, his people, the roof over 400 tenants, all of it goes to a man who will sell them for gaming debts of his own. I did not make the clause. I have hated it for a year. But it is law, and law does not care what I hate." He turned fully to her now. "I am asking you to marry me, Miss Radthorpe," he said. "That is my condition. Not a mistress, not an arrangement in the dark. A wife before God and the law, a duchess, with all that a duchess is owed. Your father's debt forgiven, your father kept in comfort, and you raised to a place from which no one may ever send you anywhere again. In exchange, I ask you to save 400 families you have never met by standing beside me in a church for the length of a service. There, I have said it. Now you may be as angry as you please." The fire spoke into the silence. The rain ran down the glass. Evelyn found that she was not angry. She examined the fact of it as she might examine a strange plant, turning it in the light. She had come to beg for time. She was being offered a throne, and a wiser, warmer part of her, the part that had carried a pouch of seeds through 6 mean rooms, saw at once the ground under the offer, the cold and stony ground, and knew it for what it was. "You are not asking me," she said quietly. "You are asking anyone. You would say these same words to any respectable woman who happened to be standing in this room today, if she were plain enough not to have suitors of her own to grieve. I happened to be standing here. That is all. You have found, in a debtor's daughter, a woman with no dowry to bargain, and no family to make terms, who may be had cheaply and quickly, and be grateful. I am the convenient one, Your Grace. I have been the convenient one my whole life. I know the shape of it in the dark." She had thought this would make him flinch. It did not. "Yes," he said. "Only that. Yes. You do not deny it." "I will not lie to you," the Duke said. "Not now, not on this, not ever if you take me. You are right in nearly all of it. I need a wife by a date. You are unmarried, respectable, in no position to refuse a duke. That is a great part of why you are sitting in that chair. I am too honest to pretend otherwise, or too tired. But you are wrong in one thing." "Name it." "You said I would say these words to anyone." He came and sat, at last, in the chair across from her, so that they were level, his amber eyes on hers. "I would not. There were 30 women I might have asked this month. My aunt made a list. I refused every name on it. Not because they were plain, Miss Radthorpe, but because when I imagined a lifetime across the breakfast table from any of them, I felt the door of this house close on me like a lid. Then a woman walked in from the rain, wet through, spending nothing she did not have, and she looked at my dead garden instead of my title, and she called it a living thing that no one had forgiven. And I found I could imagine the breakfast table. That is the difference. It is a small thing. It is the only honest thing I have to offer you, besides the money. I did not choose you because you were convenient. I chose you because you saw the garden." Evelyn sat very still. She had been seen. That was the thing that undid her, in that quiet room, more than the £4,000 and the coronet and the 400 tenants she would never meet. In 24 years of being sent and weighed and overlooked, no one had ever sat down across from her. No one had sat level with her and told her he had chosen her for the true thing in her, the one thing that was hers. She did not weep. She had trained herself long ago out of weeping in front of people who held her fate. But something in her chest moved like a frozen bed of earth turning at the first warm day. "You do not know me," she said. "No, nor you me. That is what the years are for, if you will spend them. I am asking for a marriage, not a miracle. I am a cold man, Miss Radthorpe. People find me hard. My own aunt calls me stone. I will not promise you a warm hearth every evening, because I do not know how to make one. But I will promise you the truth, always, and your own money in your own hand, and a walled garden of your own that no one will ever take from you again. The rest we will have to learn. Most people who marry for love learn it too. They only pretend they knew it in advance." Evelyn looked past him at the window. Down below, in the grey, lay the dead garden, the black beds, the broken glass house, 6 years of no one forgiving it. "Show me the garden," she said, "before I answer. Take me down and show me the garden, and then I will tell you yes or no." The Duke of Brookhaven looked at her for a long moment. Then he rose, and he offered her his arm, which no man had ever done as though he meant it, and he took her down. The garden lay behind the house, walled on all four sides in old brick the colour of dried blood. It was larger than she had guessed from the window. Once it had been laid out in beds and gravel paths, a glass house along the south wall, a pear tree trained flat against the warm brick. Now the paths were green with weed. The beds were black and sour. The glass house was a skeleton, half its panes gone, the iron gone to rust. The door hung open on one hinge, like a mouth that had given up speaking. Evelyn walked into it, with the rain in her face, and did not feel the rain. She crouched by a bed, and took off her glove, and pushed her fingers into the wet black soil. She lifted a handful, and smelled it. She crumbled it, and watched how it fell. The Duke stood behind her, under the ruined glass house, and watched her do these things, and did not ask what she was doing, which she noticed, and which counted with her more than he could know. "It is not dead," she said at last, still crouched, not turning. "That is the first thing. The soil is sour, not dead. It has been drowned and starved by turns for 6 years, and it is angry, but it is not dead. Sour soil can be sweetened. It takes lime and time and turning. The pear against the wall is alive under the moss. I can feel the sap in the low branch. It has been waiting for someone to prune it and tie it in and tell it that it is still wanted. And the glass house—" She rose and looked at the broken frame. "The iron is sound. Iron does not die of neglect, only of damp, and this iron has good paint under the rust. New glass, new putty, a fire in the flue by autumn, and you could raise pineapples in it by the year after next. My mother knew how. She taught me. It is the one thing in the world I am certain I can do." She turned then and faced him in the rain. "You asked me to save 400 families I have never met," she said. "I do not know how to do that. I am not clever about tenants and farms and the law. I would only be pretending, and you would find me out. But I can save this. I can take this dead thing that no one forgave and make it live again. I can do it well. It would be truly mine, done by my own hands. No one could say I had been bought. You cannot buy what a person makes with their hands out of sour earth. So this is my answer, Your Grace." She lifted her chin, and the rain ran off it. "I will marry you. Not for the 4,000 pounds, though I am grateful, and not for the coronet, which frightens me. I will marry you for the garden. Because you saw that I saw it, and because a man who forgives a dead garden might, in time, be worth forgiving other things. That is a poor reason for a duchess to marry. It is the only true one I have. Take it or leave it." The Duke of Brookhaven stood in the wreck of his mother's garden, the rain darkening his good black coat. He looked at the wet, plain, unbought woman in front of him. For the first time in 6 years, something crossed his still face that was not guarded at all. "I will take it," he said. They were married 11 days later. It was a small wedding, by special license, in the grey church at the corner of the square. Lady Dorothea and 4 servants stood witness, and no one came from the world of the Tun. There had been no time to make it grand. Neither of them wished it grand. Evelyn wore a gown of soft green that Lady Dorothea had ordered without asking, and refused to be thanked for. Her father was too unwell to come. He wept in his good chair, in the country cottage the Duke had already taken for him. He wept for joy and for shame in equal measure. It was the last of his weeping. The fear had gone out of his days at last. At the altar the Duke said the words in his low, even voice, and meant them as far as a cold man could. Evelyn said them, and meant them further than she had planned to. When he put the ring on her finger, his hand was steady, and hers was not. He felt it shake. He closed his hand over hers to still it. That was not in the service. She did not forget it. "There," he said quietly, when it was done. "You are a duchess. No one may send you anywhere ever again. Where would you like to go first?" "The garden," Evelyn said. And Lady Dorothea, standing behind them in dove grey, put her handkerchief to her clear old eyes and pretended fiercely that it was the cold. She began the very next morning. She did not know how to be a duchess, and she made up her mind not to pretend to know. She rose early, as she always had. She dressed in the plainest of her new gowns. She went down to the garden with an old apron over it, her mother's seed pouch in her pocket. She began to turn the sour black beds, one spadeful at a time. The servants did not know what to make of her. A duchess did not dig. A duchess ordered gardeners to dig. But Evelyn had no gardeners yet. She did not trust a hired man's hands with soil, she meant to know. So she dug herself in the grey mornings. Her back ached. Her palms blistered inside the good gloves, and then blistered through them. She had the lime brought and spread it. She had the drowned lower beds trenched to let the water run. She found the pear tree's living branch under the moss. She cleaned the bark with her own fingers. She tied the branch in against the warm south wall with strips of cloth, gently, the way her mother had shown her. It was the way you, gentle, affrighted thing, back to trusting the wall behind it. From the library window, 2 floors of grey stone above her, the Duke watched. He did not come down at first. He was a busy man, and a private one, and he had spent 6 years teaching this house that his mother's garden was a place no one went. But each morning he found himself at the window, with his coffee going cold in his hand, watching the small, determined figure in the apron turn the black earth. And each morning he stayed a little longer. Lady Dorothea noticed, because Lady Dorothea noticed everything. "You could go down," she said one morning, coming to stand beside him. "It is your garden, and your wife." "She does not need me down there," the Duke said. "She knows what she is about. I should only be in the way of the spade." "That," said his great-aunt, "is the first time in your life I have heard you give being in the way as a reason not to do a thing you wished to do. You have been in everyone's way since you could walk, and never once apologized for it. Go down, Marcus, or do not, but do not lie to me about the spade." He did not go down. Not that day. But that evening Evelyn came in with earth under her nails, her hair coming loose, a smudge on her cheek she had not noticed. On the hall table she found a parcel. It was wrapped in brown paper, her name on it in a plain, firm hand. Inside were gloves. Good gardening gloves, thick leather, sized small for a woman's hand. 3 pairs of them, so that a blistered pair might rest while another worked. There was no note. There did not need to be. She stood in the great cold hall, holding the gloves. She understood that he had watched her hands blister through the fine ones. He had said nothing. He had done this instead. And she thought quite clearly. So that is how he loves, if he loves. Not with words, with gloves, with the closing of a hand over a shaking hand, with the exact useful thing, given without asking to be thanked. She wore the new gloves the next morning. She did not thank him aloud. She only caught his eye at the breakfast table, where they sat across from one another in the grey light, exactly as he had imagined. She lifted her gloved hands a little and let him see. He inclined his head the smallest degree. That was the whole of the conversation. It was enough. They dined together each evening, because a husband and wife are meant to, though neither of them was sure how it was done. The first weeks of it were hard going. The dining room was long and cold, made for 20. They sat at one end of it, with a great deal of silence between them. A footman stood by and pretended not to hear the silence. The Duke was not a man who filled a room with talk. Evelyn had spent her life in rooms where talk was a luxury nobody could afford. So they ate, and the candles burned, and the quiet sat between them like a third guest who had not been introduced. One evening in the second week, she decided she was tired of the third guest. "Tell me about your mother," she said, setting down her spoon. It was her garden. I am mending it with my hands every day, and I do not know a single thing about the woman who made it. That seems wrong to me. A person ought to know whose ground they are standing in. The Duke was quiet so long that she thought she had trespassed, and began to be sorry. "She was not a fashionable woman," he said at last. "My father married her for her portion, and was disappointed to find she cared nothing for society and everything for growing things. She was happiest in that garden, in an old straw hat, with dirt to the elbow, exactly as you are." The great people laughed at her a little. She did not notice. She used to say a garden never once asked her whose daughter she was. I did not understand her when I was a boy. I thought a duchess ought to want grander things. I have come to think she was the wisest person I ever knew. What was she called? Frances. He said the name as though he had not spoken it aloud in years, and perhaps he had not. She died of a fever 6 years ago, in 3 days, in the spring, with the beds only half planted. I could not bear to see them finished by another hand. So I let them die. I told myself it was grief. I have begun to suspect it was cowardice wearing grief's coat. Evelyn considered this. She did not rush to comfort him. She had learned that comfort offered too quickly is only a way of asking the grieving person to stop. "It was neither," she said. "It was love with nowhere to go. That is the most dangerous thing there is. It turns sour if you keep it, the way soil turns sour if the water cannot run. But it is not dead, any more than the soil was. It only wants somewhere to run to again." She met his amber eyes across the candles. "You have been keeping your love in a drowned bed for 6 years, Your Grace. I am not surprised the house is cold. I am only surprised you have not frozen through entirely." He looked at her for a long moment across the little island of light. "No one has spoken to me like that since Frances died," he said. "People are careful with me. They are careful the way one is careful of a locked box, not a person. I find I do not want you to be careful with me. It is the strangest thing. I have spent 6 years building a house no one could get into, and I have gone and married the one woman who walks straight through the walls as though they were painted on." "I do not know how to be careful," Evelyn said. "I never had the leisure to learn it. Poor people cannot afford to be careful with each other. There is not the time. You say the true thing, or you go to bed with it unsaid, and in the morning one of you might be gone. I am sorry if it is rough. It is the only way I know." "Do not be sorry," the Duke said. "Do not, on any account, Learn to be careful. I forbid it. I am a duke, and I may forbid one thing a year, and that is the thing I choose." And Evelyn laughed. It came out of her before she could stop it. A real laugh, surprised and bright in the cold, long room, the first laughter that dining rooms had heard in 6 years. The Duke did not laugh, but something moved at the corner of his still mouth, the place where a smile would go if he ever let one. He looked at her, laughing in the candlelight, as a man looks at a fire on a cold night. It was as though he had forgotten such a thing was allowed. After that, the evenings were different. The third guest did not come back. He began to come down to the garden. Not to help at first, for he did not know how, and was too proud to be seen not knowing. He came only to stand on the gravel in the dusk and watch her work, his hands behind his back, saying little. Then one evening he took off his coat without a word, and rolled his fine sleeves, and knelt in the dirt beside her, and asked her gruffly what a man was meant to do with a trowel. She showed him. He was clumsy, and got earth on his cuffs that no valet could forgive, and did not care, and neither did she. From an upper window, Lady Dorothea watched the Duke of Brookhaven learn to weed a bed. She said nothing of it to anyone, and wore all evening the private smile of a woman who has seen the seasons turn often enough to trust them. The world, of course, did not leave them alone. The marriage of the Duke of Brookhaven to a nobody, a debtor's daughter with no family and no fortune, married in 11 days by special license, was the best gift London society had been handed in a season. The drawing rooms hummed with it. It was said the girl had trapped him. It was said he had lost his wits. It was said, most often and most cruelly, that she was a plain, scheming creature who had crawled up out of the gutter on the strength of her father's ruin, and that she would disgrace him within the year. The chief of the Sayers was Lady Estella Cardew. Lady Estella was 23, and beautiful, truly beautiful, with the kind of face that made a room reorder itself around her when she entered it. For 2 seasons she had understood that she would be the next Duchess of Brookhaven. Her mother had understood it. All of London had understood it. It had not been arranged in words, because it had not needed to be. It had simply been the shape the future was going to take, the way water is going to run downhill. And then the water had run somewhere else, to a wet, plain girl from a chandler's street, and Lady Estella had been left standing at the top of the hill, with her flowers ordered and nowhere for them to go. She did not rage. That was not her way, and it would not have served her. She smiled, and she was gracious, and she called at Brookhaven House within days of the wedding to pay her respects to the new Duchess, because to stay away would have been to admit that she minded. Evelyn received her in the green drawing-room, because Lady Dorothea said she must, and because a duchess cannot dig every hour of the day. Lady Estella was exquisite. She swept in, furred and scented. She took Evelyn's plain hands in her gloved ones. She looked at Evelyn's face with an interest so warm, so total, that it took Evelyn a moment to understand it was a kind of violence. "But you are not at all what they say," Lady Estella said, gazing at her. "They are unkind, you know, in the drawing-rooms. Wicked. I have quite scolded them. I said, she cannot be so very plain, or dear Brookhaven would never... But there, I am running on. You will forgive me. We are to be great friends, you and I. I insist upon it. I have known Marcus since we were children, you see. I know all his moods. I shall be able to tell you things about him that will save you such trouble. When he goes silent, for instance, when he shuts himself in the library and will not come out for days. You will learn. It takes years to learn a man like Marcus. I have had years. She smiled, lovely and merciless. You have had 11 days. Evelyn poured the tea. She had met Lady Estella before, in 100 forms, in every mean room she had ever lived in. The cousin who reminded her that the dress was a hand-me-down. The neighbour who was so kind about the fallen family. She knew the weapon exactly, because the weapon was always the same. Here is a thing I have that you have not. I will hold it out to you as a gift, so that you cannot strike it from my hand. You are quite right, my lady, Evelyn said, and handed her the cup. You have had yours, and I have had 11 days. I could not learn him in 11 days. I do not mean to try. I mean to take the yours, one at a time, the way one takes anything worth having. A garden is not learned in 11 days either. I have found it does not much matter how long another person tended the ground before you. What matters is whose hands are in the soil now. Lady Estella's smile did not move, but something behind it did, some small cold recalculation, and Evelyn saw that she had been heard, and that she had made, in that lovely furred woman, an enemy for the season. How charming, Lady Estella said. You speak of him as a garden. I speak of everything as a garden, Evelyn said. It is my failing. More tea? When Lady Estella had gone, in a swirl of scent and gracious poison, Lady Dorothea emerged from the window where she had been sitting, unregarded the whole time. You have made her hate you, the old woman observed. She hated me before she came, my lady. I only declined to pretend she did not. There is a difference, though I grant you it is a fine one. Lady Dorothea looked at her sharply. Then she laughed. A real laugh, dry and delighted. You quote him, she said. You have been married 11 days, and you have already caught the trick of his speech. Oh, this is going to be a very great deal better than I feared. Come, leave the tea. Show me what you have done with those dreadful drowned beds. I have not been down into that garden in 6 years. I could not bear it. I think, perhaps, I could bear it now. The weeks warmed, as spring at last remembered how, and the garden began to answer. The pear tree, cleaned and tied and forgiven, put out a haze of white bloom against the warm brick, the first flowers that Wall had seen since the old Duchess died. The trenched beds drained sweet. The lime did its slow work, and the sour black soil, turned and turned again, began to smell of earth instead of grief. Evelyn brought a man at last, an old gardener named Wicket from the country. He was a silent, knotted person who spoke to plants and not to people. The two of them understood each other from the first hour. Between them, spadeful by spadeful, the walled garden began to come back to life. And one grey evening, in the last of April, standing alone in the garden, with her mother's pouch in her hand, Evelyn at last untied the soft grey leather and shook the seeds into her palm. She had carried them through 6 mean rooms. She had told them one day. The day had come. She knelt at the warm south wall, in the sweetened bed she had made with her own blistered hands. She planted her dead mother's garden, twist of paper by twist of paper, larkspur, stock, sweet rocket, foxglove, columbine, wallflower, for the wall. She pressed each seed into ground that would, this time, keep it. She was weeping by the end. She had not meant to. It was the safest place in the world to weep, alone, in the dusk, with earth on her hands. She did not hear him come down. She became aware of him only when she rose and turned. The Duke of Brookhaven stood on the gravel path a little way off, hatless in the blue dusk, watching her with those amber eyes. She did not know how long he had been there. "I did not mean to spy," he said. "I saw you kneel. I thought I could not tell from the window whether something was wrong. So I came down." He looked at the freshly planted bed, the small twists of empty paper still in her hand. "You are planting?" "My mother's seeds," Evelyn said. Her voice was not steady, and she did not try to make it steady, because it was him. "She gathered them from a garden we lost when I was a girl. I have carried them for 11 years and never planted them, because you do not plant a garden in a house you will lose by winter. I only realized, kneeling there, I realized I will not lose this one. That is all. It undid me a little. I am sorry." The Duke of Brookhaven crossed the gravel and stood beside her, and looked down at the small, dark bed where a dead woman's garden lay newly sleeping in the earth. "No," he said, "you will not lose this one." He was quiet a moment. "This was my mother's garden. I have not been able to come into it for 6 years. I told the house it was to be left. I told myself it was respect. It was not respect. It was that I could not bear to see it dead, and could not bear to mend it, because mending it meant she was truly gone, and the world had gone on to spring without her. So I left it to rot, out of— I do not have the word. Out of a grief I would not put down." Evelyn said nothing. She had learned, in the mending of dead things, when to be silent and let the ground do its own slow work. "And now," he said, "there is a woman kneeling in it, planting her own dead mother's seeds, making my mother's grave into a nursery. I do not know what to call that either. But I find I can stand in this garden tonight, for the first time in 6 years, and it does not close my throat. You have done that. Not the tenants, not the claws. This, a thing no money of mine could buy, done by your hands, out of sour earth." He turned to her in the dark. "I told you I was a cold man, and that I did not know how to make a warm hearth. I still do not, but I begin to think I married a woman who does, and who has been quietly making one in my garden, while I watched from a window like a coward, and called it being busy. Come in out of the dusk, Duchess. You will take a chill. And I find I do not like the thought of you taking a chill. That is new. I am not certain what to do with it. But it is true, and I promised you always the truth." He offered her his arm. She took it with her earth-dark hand, and did not think to be ashamed of the earth, because he had not once looked at it as anything but hers. They went up into the house together, through the blue dusk, and behind them, in the warm dark against the old brick, a dead garden lay planted and forgiven, waiting only for the light to come and call it up. If the story were a kind one, it would have ended there, in the dusk, with the garden planted and the cold man beginning to thaw. But the world had one more turn to take, and it turned, as the world so often does, on money, which had begun the whole affair. It was Lady Estella who turned it. She had not gone away. She had gone quiet, which in a woman like Lady Estella is not the same thing. Through the long weeks of the warming spring, she had sat in the drawing rooms. She had listened and gathered and waited, the way a clever creature waits. She had learned 2 things worth the knowing. The first was the claws. She had always known its shape, half London had, but now she learned its teeth, the exact date, the cousin who would take all if the Duke were somehow found to have failed it. The second thing she learned was newer. She paid a dismissed footman for it. It was this: George Radthorpe, the debtor father, safe now in his country cottage, had one debt more. The Duke had not forgiven it, because the Duke had never known of it. An old note, small, £300, made in a bad year to a moneylender in the city, forgotten by everyone but the man who held it. And that man, for a consideration, would very much like to be paid. Lady Estella bought the note. She did not want £300. She wanted the marriage undone, or if not undone, then poisoned, so that the whole world might see that the plain, scheming girl had brought fresh ruin into the house within the season, exactly as everyone had promised. And she saw a way to make the note do it. She came to Brookhaven House on a bright morning in May, and she asked, very sweetly, to see the Duchess alone. Evelyn received her in the green drawing-room. She had earth on her, as she nearly always did now, and she did not trouble to hide it. "I have come as a friend," Lady Estella said, and laid a folded paper on the table between them. "I want you to understand that. Read it." Evelyn read it. It was the old note, her father's hand at the foot of it, £300, and interest run up over years to nearer 5. She felt the old cold open under her, the trap-door she had lived over all her life, that never quite goes away, no matter how high you climb. "Where did you get this?" she said. "Does it matter? I have it. I paid for it, out of pure friendship, to spare you a scene. Your father is a debtor still, you see. You told all of London the Duke had bought you free. But here is a debt he never mentioned, hidden, exactly the sort of thing a scheming family hides. Now," Lady Estella folded her lovely hands, "I have no wish to be cruel. I will give you this note, and burn it before your eyes, and no one need ever know, on one small condition. You will go to Marcus. You will tell him that you find you cannot love him. You married only for the money and the rank. You are sorry, but your heart is not in it. You wish to be quietly set apart. He is a proud man. He will let you go without a fight, rather than beg. You keep your settlement, more than you ever dreamed of, more than a debtor's daughter has any right to. You go free and rich, and the note burns, and your father is safe, and no one is hurt. Refuse me, and I take this note to every drawing-room in London. I tell them the truth. Within one season, the Radthorpe girl brought a second hidden debt into the house of Brookhaven. I ruin you. I ruin him through you, and I do it smiling. Those are the terms. They are generous. I would take them if I were a plain girl from a chandler's street who had climbed as high as she was ever going to climb." Evelyn sat very still and looked at the note on the table. She thought of the trap-door. She thought of 6 mean rooms. She thought of her father in his good chair in the country, the fear at last gone out of his days, and how easily this woman could put it back. She thought of the seeds she had carried 11 years and planted at last in ground she had been promised she would not lose. And she thought of a cold man. He had closed his hand over her shaking hand. He had given her gloves without a note. He had stood in his dead mother's garden and told her the exact truth, because he had promised her always the truth. She stood up. "You have made a mistake, my lady," Evelyn said, and her voice was very quiet and very level. "The same mistake they all make. You have looked at me and seen the plain girl from the chandler's street, who may be had cheaply and be grateful. You have offered me money to run, because you cannot imagine a woman like me choosing anything but the money. But I have already been offered money to save myself. My husband offered it to me the first day, £4,000 and a coronet, to a woman he did not know. And do you know what I told him? I told him I would not have it for the money. I told him I would have it for the garden. You do not understand that, and you never will, and that is why you have lost, though you are holding the note, and I am holding nothing but earth. You will be ruined, Lady Estella said, and for the first time her lovely voice was not steady. Do you understand? I will tell them all. Tell them, Evelyn said. Tell them today. Tell them my father is a fool who ran up debts, because he is, and I've never once denied it. Not to the Duke, not to you, not to anyone. You cannot ruin a person with a truth she has already told. That is the flaw in your whole design, my lady. Shame only has a hold on people who are hiding. I stopped hiding a long time ago. I walked to this house in the rain, my father's debt in my glove. I said it out loud to a duke. He married me anyway, not in spite of it, because of what he saw in a woman who would say it out loud. So keep your note. Take it to every drawing room you like. And when you have finished, you will still be a woman who bought an old man's shame for £300 to break a marriage you were not part of, and I will still be the woman who plants gardens. I know which of us I would rather be. The green drawing-room was very quiet. Lady Estella Cardew stood. She picked up her note with a hand that was not quite steady. For one moment, one bare moment, the lovely face was not lovely at all. It was only frightened and young, left behind at the top of a hill, with her flowers ordered and nowhere to send them. Evelyn knew exactly what it was to be left behind. She felt no triumph at all, only a kind of tired pity. He was to have been mine, Lady Estella said, very low. Everyone said so. My whole life, everyone said so. I know, Evelyn said gently. That is the cruelest thing they do to us, is it not? They tell us the shape our life will take, until we forget we were ever allowed to want a different one. I am sorry, my lady. I am. But he was not yours. He was not anyone's. He was a man in a dead garden, waiting to be forgiven. And it was not your hands that came. Lady Estella went out without another word. She did not take the note to the drawing-rooms. Perhaps she found she could not, after all, or perhaps something in the green room had reached the frightened young woman under the firs. Within the month, she accepted the hand of a plain, kind baronet from Kent. He loved her sincerely, and thought her the most fortunate thing that had ever happened to him. She went away to the country. If she was not happy at first, she was in time. That is more than the story owed her, and more than she had meant to give Evelyn. It is the way of forgiven ground to grow things no one planted. But that was later. On that bright May morning, when Lady Estella had gone, Evelyn stood alone in the green drawing-room and began, at last, to shake. She had been brave through the whole of it. Bravery, she had learned, is a thing you spend, and when the danger passes, the bill comes due. She was still shaking when the door opened, and the Duke of Brookhaven came in, quickly, his still face not still at all. "Dorothea told me Lady Estella was here, and that you were alone with her," he said. "What did she—" He stopped. He saw the shaking. He crossed the room in 3 strides, and he took Evelyn's earth-marked hands in both of his, and he closed his hands over them exactly as he had at the altar, to still them. "Tell me," he said, "whatever it is. You promised me nothing, but I find I am asking. Tell me." So she told him. All of it. The old note, the £300 her father had hidden, the offer to buy her freedom, the threat to ruin them both. She told him plainly, because she had nothing left to spend but the truth, and she watched his face go very cold and very dangerous as she spoke, and she understood the cold was not for her. "She offered you money to leave me," he said quietly, when she had finished, "and you refused it." "Yes. Why?" His amber eyes were on hers, and there was something naked in them now, the guard gone entirely down. "You would have been rich and free and safe. Your father's last debt burned. It was everything you walked into this house wanting, and more. Why did you refuse it?" Evelyn looked at him. She could have said something small. She was tired and shaken, and it would have been easy to say something small and safe. But he had given her, from the first grey morning, nothing but the truth, and she found she could do no less. "Because I did not marry you for the money," she said. "I told you that the first day, and you did not believe me. Not really. You thought it was a brave thing a poor girl says to keep her pride. But it was true then, and it is truer now. I married you for the garden. And then, while I was mending your garden, without at all meaning to, I began to mend the man who owned it. And somewhere in these weeks, the two things stopped being separate. I do not know how to say it better than that. I would not leave you for £300. I would not leave you for 4,000 or 40. Because you are the one thing in my whole life that I chose, and that chose me back, not because I was convenient, but because you saw the garden. And a person does not sell the one thing that is truly theirs. Not for any money, not to anyone, ever. The Duke of Brookhaven stood holding her shaking hands in his still ones, in the bright green room. The last of the 6 years' cold went out of his face all at once. It was like frost off a wall, when the sun at last comes round to it. "I had a whole life planned," he said, low, "of a marriage of convenience, a wife across the breakfast table, a duty done, an estate saved, a clause satisfied, 2 people politely apart under one large roof. I was resigned to it. I thought it was the most a man like me could hope for. And instead a woman walked in out of the rain and would not be bought. She mended my dead garden. She mended me. She has just refused a fortune to stay at my side. And I find—" His voice was not quite steady, the cold, even voice, and she treasured the crack in it. "I find I have gone and fallen in love with my own wife. It was no part of the arrangement. I have no idea how to do it properly. I would not undo it for anything under heaven. There. I have said it. I promised you always the truth. That is the truest thing I own." Evelyn Radthorpe, Duchess of Brookhaven, looked up at her husband and stopped shaking. "Then we shall have to learn it together," she said. "Like the garden, one season at a time." And he lifted her earth-dark hand, the shaking gone out of it now. He pressed his mouth to the back of it, gravely, the way you gentle a frightened thing back to trusting the wall behind it. It was, they both understood, only the beginning of the mending. And that is the only kind of ending worth having. The garden came up that summer in a glory the house had not seen in 6 years. The larkspur rose blue against the warm brick, where a dead woman had gathered its seed a lifetime before. The stock scented the whole square at evening, so that people slowed as they passed the wall of Brookhaven House without knowing why. The pear tree, forgiven and tied and fed, set fruit for the first time since the old Duchess died. In the mended glass house, its iron scraped and painted, its new glass, bright, small green things stood in ordered rows. They reached for the light. The Duke came down into the garden every evening now. He had learned to prune badly, and Evelyn let him, and old Wicket suffered his dukeness's help with a silence that was its own kind of tenderness. Lady Dorothea took her tea in the garden through the whole of that summer, in dove grey, in the shade of the pear tree. She said more than once that she had not expected to live to see it. She had never in her life been so pleased to be wrong. George Radthorpe came up from the country in July. Well again, the fear long gone from his gentle face. His daughter walked him through the garden she had made. She showed him her mother's flowers, grown tall in ground that would keep them. The old man wept once more. But it was the last kind of weeping, the kind that waters things. The tun, which had promised her ruin within the year, was made to eat its promise. The Duchess of Brookhaven did not give grand balls. She did not gamble. She did not do any of the fashionable things a duchess was meant to do. She grew things. Word went round, as words do, that her glass house raised the finest early strawberries in London. It was said she sent baskets of them, unasked, to houses where there was illness, with no card and no expectation of thanks. The same drawing-rooms that had called her a scheming nobody began, grudgingly, to call her an original. It is easier to sneer at a woman for climbing than for kneeling in the dirt. She gave them nothing to sneer at but earth. Lady Estella, from her quiet marriage in Kent, sent a single letter that autumn. It was short. It said only that she had planted a border of stocks along her new husband's south wall, that they had come up well, and that she thought of the green drawing-room sometimes, and hoped the Duchess was content. Evelyn wrote back that she was. She wrote that stocks did best when they were not fussed over, and that she was glad of the border. It was not friendship, but it was not the other thing either. It was two women who had wanted the same wall, and had learned, each in her own country, that there is more than one wall in the world. As for the Duke, London hardly knew him. He came to fewer and fewer of its evenings. He smiled at none of its hostesses. He was, by every account, exactly as cold as he had ever been. Only the household knew the truth, and the household kept it, the way a good household keeps everything. They knew that his Grace rose early now. They knew he took his coffee, standing at the library window, watching a small figure in an apron turn the beds below. The shutters on the east front had been closed since the old Duchess died. One morning in June, they were thrown open, and were not closed again, so that the sun came into the cold rooms, and found them, at last, warm. They did not have a grand life. That was never what either of them was for. They had a walled garden, and a mended house, and a great many quiet evenings across a breakfast table that had once looked like a lid closing, and now looked like a place two people chose, each morning, to sit. The clause was satisfied. Oakhold was safe. 400 tenants kept their roofs. They never knew they owed them to a wet, plain girl, who had walked to a great door in the rain to say a word her family owed. In time, there were children in the walled garden, though not yet, and that is another story, and this one is nearly told. She had been sent, once, to apologize for a debt she did not make. She had walked to a cold house in the rain, expecting nothing but mercy, if she was lucky, and shame, if she was not. And she had found, in the dead garden behind the pale door, the one thing no one had ever offered the plain girl who was always sent and never chosen. A man who looked at her face and not her hem. A man who saw the true thing in her and chose it, and was chosen in return. She had gone to save her father, and had ended by saving a garden, a house, a marriage, and a cold man's frozen heart, and had in the saving of them been, at long last, herself saved. The debt that had begun it all was forgiven and forgotten. What grew up in its place was worth more than any sum ever written on any note, and it grew, and it kept growing, in ground that no one would ever take from her again. Thank you for listening to the story all the way to the end. Please tell us which city you're watching from, and what the story made you feel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories.